10+1 Questions Real Life in Academia,
a new talk show in which we ask some of the scholars we admire the most about their careers,
the best piece of advice they have received,
and the tips and tricks that explain their professional success.
Our talk show looks into some of the perhaps invisible sides of academia.
Beyond the pressure to obtain a tenure-track job, write grants, and publish,
we try to get to know the person writing the books and articles that you are reading.
How they manage their time, who has inspired them, and what their regrets are.
My name is Sofia Ganshardash.
My name is Volker Stocker.
And we will be co-hosting 10+ Questions Real Life in Academia.
Welcome to a new episode of 10+1 Questions, Real Life in Academia. Our guest today is Orly Lobel. Orly is the Warren Distinguished Professor of Law at the University of San Diego. She's a prolific scholar with expertise in areas such as intellectual property or employment and labor law, and is a commentator and speaker who travels around the world with an impact on policy and industry. Orly has taught at top institutions around the globe and is the recipient of several prestigious research grants. She has authored several award-winning books, among them the books Talent Wants to Be Free and her new book You Don't Own Me. Orly was recently named one of the Marker magazine's 50 Sharpest Minds. In 2016, she was invited to Washington, D.C. to present Talent Wants to Be Free at the White House, a meeting which resulted in a presidential call for action. Now, while this is extremely impressive, there are other facts that are perhaps lesser known about Orly. She likes tennis, running with her Labrador at the beach, and also enjoys starting her day with a handstand. Welcome, Orly. It is a great pleasure to have you on our podcast. First question for you, Orly. If you weren't an academic, what else would you do?
That's a great question, because I am an academic because I can be multiple things. You know, we wear so many hats that we aren't one thing. I always wanted to be a writer, an author, a researcher. A journalist actually was a profession that I had thought about. But I feel like I can get to do that and also be an educator and collaborator. So I feel like, you know, if I find new passions, I can do it as an academic.
That's excellent. So basically, you now are in a position where you can do all that stuff you basically would do as an alternative. So you can combine all that stuff. Yeah,
and it's kind of similar to, you didn't ask me this specific question, but if I wasn't a law professor versus, you know, what other kind of academic would I be? And that, again, I think a lot of law professors and social scientists have a little bit of the science envy, you know, people who do hard sciences. And again, I remind myself that we venture into that. We collaborate with people like neuroscientists and data scientists and, you know, thinking about biology if you're doing intellectual property. And so it's the pleasure of constantly learning new things. I went to law school with the thought of becoming a professor. I had my mother as a role model. He's a psychology professor. But again, with Volker's question, you know, what would you do? You know, would I be a practicing attorney? And by the way, I have this statistic that in American law schools, students used to go primarily because they watched the To Kill a Mockingbird, you know, the iconic book. But then at some point it shifted, and they will cite Legally Blonde as more important to their decision.
Time has changed. Yeah.
But to your question about practicing, I would not have liked to be a full-time attorney, but again, with that kind of multiple hats and flexibility of academics, I've been having a lot of fun doing policy work and advising government agencies on the one side, and doing consistently in the past few years expert witness work. So I do get to, I was recently deposed in a couple of cases, and I testified before arbitration panels. So I do have that kind of hands-on practice experience that is ongoing.
That's really interesting. And so you were talking about wearing these different hats. In the introduction, we learned that you are playing tennis, you like running at the beach with a Labrador, and also enjoy doing handstands. How does a typical working day or day in general then look like for you?
Yeah, a typical working day really varies significantly between the days that I'm teaching during the semester and then non-teaching days, or during the month that I'm not teaching. So teaching does take a lot of specific energy, and then I kind of build my day around prepping for the course and meeting with students before or after, and doing much more kind of bureaucratic kind of work. And then I'm very protective of having those typical, non-teaching, just blocks of times of writing that are more extended. But again, typical is, the privilege of academics is that we don't have, super typical days. I have the flexibility. And for me, as you said, I really care about also being active. And so I chart out some time for the social part. Now we have social distancing, but I play tennis, so that's my COVID sport, and running and doing yoga and all of those things that keep me energized for the work time.
It sounds great. It sounds like you basically try to also find a dynamic balance, right, between the work and also work out and social activity. When we shift the focus basically to your career and career path, and also in the introduction, we've heard a lot about your basically your way you started in Tel Aviv, and then you went to Harvard. Now you're a professor in San Diego. What was the greatest challenge, would you say, you had to overcome in your career?
Yeah, so you already described that path as, I think, a challenge of having a foot in different worlds, in different continents, and types of legal regimes. So when I first arrived for my graduate studies on the East Coast here, I did find it challenging and kind of having to overcome that perception of others of foreignness. I remember this experience of, I was already an attorney when I came to graduate school, and I had already clerked on the Israeli Supreme Court, and so I knew something about the law, but I think it took me a little bit of time to both kind of with myself and also with kind of overcoming some perceptions of fellow students, maybe of some of the teachers there, to be relevant and to take that kind of comparative edge as an advantage, and really saying, we have this additional lens and framework, and this just the strength of the dual identity. But it does continue to be a challenge in some ways, in a good way, for me, where I don't live and work in the country where I grew up in, and I very much care about continuing all the time to have some impact and definitely connections in Israel. So I collaborate with Israeli scholars. I always want to have connections to Europe, and I visit Europe when it's possible before the pandemic.
Right.
at least once a year, lecturing and conferencing in Europe. So again, I've taken that, it's challenging to, try to kind of be global about your work, but it's very rewarding.
One question I find very interesting, and perhaps is also very, very interesting or insightful for our viewers and listeners. What is the best piece of advice someone has given to you?
I would say during my graduate studies, the best piece of advice, I remember walking in Cambridge, Massachusetts, through the Harvard quad and meeting Lucien Bebchuk, who's an Israeli and Harvard law professor. And he said, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the great." And he gave me, I think, the advice, probably he doesn't remember this, but to share my work often, to share it early, to start publishing, even when it's not, the best you will ever do.
Right.
And I think it's just been my guiding light of having a portfolio of works and not, being too anxious about, just anything, like one single project, like it's the final word of anything.
The next question is basically one of my favorite questions, really. And I think I'm so interested to hear what you will reply here. And this is, do you have academic role models yourself? Or do you have somebody in academia who has inspired you and keeps inspiring you?
Oh, so many, so many. And it's really important, actually, again, when we're thinking about advice for, scholars at the beginning of their careers, graduate students, and then throughout your scholarly career, to think about kind of models, role models, and mentors in, I think, multiple ways, not kind of just one person that you want to emulate. So I've been fortunate to have had wonderful teachers. Martha Minow is one of my professors that comes to mind, and she's been really kind of a guiding light in how she is so theoretically deep, but also practical and practice knowledgeable, and wanting to always kind of be critical and constructive is a lot of how I think of my work. A model for my recent book, For You Don't Own Me, where I kind of took that challenge of writing something that was not like my previous work. It was more of a character-driven, full story, full narrative, nonfiction to the broader audience. And this is a fun fact that it has recently been optioned to become a film. So that's very rewarding. I'm actually working with, I'm pointing up there because I'm up north. I'm working with a Hollywood production company on
Amazing.
The script. So a role model for kind of writing research and narrative nonfiction is Jill Lepore. She's a Harvard historian, and she writes for The New Yorker. It's been really rewarding because I actually have never met her, but I had loved her books, and then she ended up writing a review of You Don't Own Me, of my book, in The New Yorker, where she writes regularly. So that was kind of a closing of a circle there. And then, so many role models, newer scholars and older scholars. I mentioned my mom. My husband is a great academic and kind of institutional leader. And, even from my kids, I learn about the writing process. So I learn all the time from my collaborators. And
So Orly, you just mentioned a number of academic role models, and the fact you draw inspiration from numerous collaborations, including collaborations with your husband. And I've noticed that you have co-author with your husband on a near professor at also UC San Diego and vice dean. And I was wondering, is it different to co-author with your significant other, especially when you think of other collaborations you have had with other colleagues?
Yes, it's different. He has called me the co-author from hell because I'm home to see that he's like at night, just like playing a video game instead of reading our draft. But it's actually pure pleasure to have a partner who is, like my life partner, my best friend, and also knows about my work, and we collaborate. We haven't done it recently, so he's been so busy with his associate dean stuff, and he has a lot of PhD students that he's guiding right now. But yeah, we actually last night we went to dinner, just the two of us and the dog, and we were discussing like some potential research project, and he said I can run the numbers really quickly, and you can design the research, the study. So it's really nice, and it's nice that we don't have the same last name. So it's like, if you don't know, you don't know that Amir and Lobel are married.
So when you think of your research projects, and do you like have any academic regrets? I mean, not only about not having co-authored more with your husband, but for example, just in general, articles that you didn't finish, articles that you didn't revise and resubmit, books or book projects that you decided not to continue with.
Yeah, well, I would advise all of us, myself and everybody, to not regret anything too much. To kind of be like Edith Piaf saying "Je ne regrette rien." I think there's always the road not taken. There's always more projects than you can accomplish in the span of a year, in the span of a lifetime. Again, the advantage of being an academic is that you have, like, I know that I have many more books in me, and it is very difficult sometimes to know where to put your weight and how much time to devote to each topic and when to move to something else. But that's why it's important to step back and to think about your kind of bigger project and what how things fit in, and where do you feel like you have something to contribute and a comparative advantage. Where are your insights? What are the kinds of methodologies that you want to bring in? What are the issues that are really important to you? So again, I think I don't regret any projects that I haven't done, but I think I would like to do more and more work that is really socially and politically impactful, in the sense of bringing more justice. I went to become a legal scholar in order to create more, or to help move us to more justice, fairness, welfare, and so for me, a lot of my career has been to really make sure that I'm doing something that is meaningful and has significance.
And I mean, I would then actually like to make a connection between your current projects, which are, as you say yourself, projects that have a social, it's a very strong societal dimension. And I'd like to connect that to I believe one of your most cited articles, and probably one of your first articles, the Renew Deal. So certainly the first article I read by you, and it has influenced my work tremendously, because it is an article which is not only, doesn't have perhaps the same societal dimension that you see in your more recent work, but it's an article that has that reflects upon a very important period of history, and also offers a regulatory framework, also governance framework. But in meanwhile, you have, of course, changed the course of your writing and have produced much more. So when you reflect upon, your work since the Renew Deal to what you are currently doing right now, do you feel that you have changed your position regarding any significant issues?
Um, I wouldn't say I changed my position, but I may have kind of evolved in my style and the types of projects that I select. So the Renew Deal is very near and dear to my heart. I think still today is my single most cited article. Has actually been recently identified as one of the 5, I think, most cited articles, law review articles of the decade or something. And so that was really rewarding because, as you say, Sophia, I wrote it very early on. I mean, just starting teaching, and it has been really impactful on me and others, where I do see like it's a framework. It's exactly like you describe it. It's a framework that is, a lot of it is kind of theoretical and looking at schools of thought and bringing them together, but it really lends itself to then thinking about it, using it, kind of engaging it for the more concrete, types of work that a lot of us want to do, continue to do. So I think the kind of bigger insight is that you have to have both. You have to have, as a scholar, the theory, and you have to engage with the schools of thought and the kind of ideas, kind of the world of ideas, and then also explain why this is important. What are the stakes? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the winners and losers? I think it's not interesting to do either, only the theory or I mean, I don't want to say not interesting. To me, it's not, it hasn't been as rewarding to kind of only have, the one side of these kind of integral, inherently connected types of work.
The articles you produce are not like 10,000 word articles, they are 20,000 word articles. So that this needs to be said, along with, a number of books. So, and you also mentioned your routine, that you work out quite a lot. You make, carve time for your family. So what is your secret to time management?
I don't sleep. No. No,
you look well rested, I must say.
No, I actually, I feel like the busier I've gotten, the more efficient I've gotten. So I really, if I can give, advice, it sounds kind of pretentious to give advice on like time management, and we all need help on all of this, and I'm as guilty as anybody else with like some procrastination and some waste of time, but that's totally fine. I think what I do think is helpful is to really be consistent, to be very protective of your writing time, to not wait for some like huge muse to come, to not give way to this kind of idea of a writer's block. I think that I actually love reading about the writing process of authors, not giving myself excuses of like, oh, I don't have the muse right now, or I don't have enough time right now. I only have 45 minutes. That's not a good reason not to sit down and still do something and write something. And really kind of once you care about your projects, I think it comes with the territory that you accomplish, what you set out to do. So that's why I've found that I love writing books, as well as articles, but kind of the books are something that's the newer thing for me. So I have I just signed a new book contract, which I'm very excited about digital technology and their potential to empower and increase equality. So it's kind of a response to a lot of the worries that are very justified that we have right now with technology and their ability to exclude or to replicate past wrongs. I'm offering kind of a vision and a more constructive, optimistic take on what we can do to be ethical, but move forward with the train that's already left the station of technology. So I'm excited about it, and so it doesn't feel like work. It's like, this is a long answer, but Confucius said, like, find a job that you like, and then you never have to work a day in your life. So yeah, it's
Right.
like, that's what I try to do.
And so on time management, I believe it's also important to mention that for female academics, it can be a little bit challenging, or at least a little bit more challenging. Could you, would you have a word of advice for female academics, especially young academics watching us?
Yeah, it's super challenging, and it's even more challenging probably right now with the pandemic. A lot of kids are at home. A lot of people are working at home, and then like the boundaries, which have always been very blurry with academics, between your leisure time and your work time, your home and your office. Those boundaries are becoming even more difficult to draw. It's hard. I have 3 daughters, and I really kind of try to be kind to myself and to my husband when we don't have, like, time to work, because, they're priorities. So, like, notwithstanding everything I said before about, like, not giving yourself excuses, I mean, there's very legitimate excuses during, when you have small children, to sometimes do a little less. I think maybe the one, single important advice for women, and it's, again, really hard to give that advice because it's, a lot of it is out of our control, but to have a supportive partner when you're, deciding to build a family, and to make sure that, you're an equal in the relationship. And as we know, the statistics are that no, women work the second shift and the third shift at home after they come home.
So we're coming to an end to our questions, and we of course would like to ask you a final personal question, which is, what is the one thing that most people don't know about you that you would like to share with our viewers?
Well, the viewers already know that I'm Israeli. I grew up in Israel, but maybe it doesn't come to mind that I started my working, life, my career path with my military service. So my first job was really as an intelligence commander in the Israeli Defense Forces, and I was, a data scientist, analytics person in the intelligence, and that's important because I did have that regiment of, like, a very very rigid, very intense work life before becoming an academic. And so I think I still treat my job as my job, even though it's, we talked about how blurry the, boundaries of time and space are. I still try to kind of remember those days where, there were, like, severe deadlines and, huge stakes and commands and bosses. Like, now, academics don't have a boss really, definitely, now that I have my tenure and chair and everything, it can, create those moral hazards that we sometimes see of, like, oh, what is making me keep going. And it is really the inner discipline, or being internally disciplined and also collaborative. Like I feel like those military days were really important in kind of building teamwork skills and interdisciplinary knowledge. It actually helped shape my graduate studies and everything that followed.
It's actually definitely something that I'm sure that our viewers would assume that you went to the army because you're Israeli, but I'm sure they didn't know what you did in the army. So that's definitely something very personal and unique for us to share with them. And as you know, our show is called 10+1 questions, which means that we also give you the opportunity to ask a question that you either would like to ask someone else or that you have always wanted to be asked. So what is your +1 question, Orly?
What is my +1 question? Well, I'm always looking for book recommendations, and I always want to ask people what are their favorite books, what are the books that influence them. I know, Sophia, you asked that question too. You're such an avid reader, and so yeah, just you know, how you were influenced by different books.
Thank you so much, Orly, for being with us, for being so open, and for sharing with us so much knowledge regarding your scholarship, but also so many personal facts. And we hope that our viewers will enjoy this talk show as much as we did.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun. I'm excited about your show and you guys becoming talk show hosts.
Thank you very much, Orly. It was a great pleasure and honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.